Welcome everyone, this is Group 1 from Division G and we are sharing this informative video about basic instruction execution cycle. So what is the instruction execution cycle? The processing involved in the execution of a single instruction is termed as instruction cycle. Instruction cycle is the time it takes a CPU to execute and retrieve a complete execution. Every single task on computer undergoes this cycle and the process is repeated until the system is shut down. Instruction cycle is simply a series of steps. In a basic computer, each instruction cycle includes the following procedures. It can fetch instruction from memory. It is used to decode the instruction. It can read the effective address from the memory and it can execute the instruction. Now, speaking of what you're able to see on the screen is a flowchart which demonstrates how instruction is a set of micro instructions and program is a set of instructions, whereas software is a set of programs. Summing up, we have the proper definition for instruction cycle, basic operation process to run a program which retrieves program instruction from its memory that determines what actions the instruction dictates and carries out those actions. The next slides we have components. The first one is PC, which is program counter registers. It keeps track or stores the address of next instruction to be executed. After execution, the next address value will be there in PC, or simply saying program counter is incremented to point to the next instruction after each fetch upon successful retrieval of instruction in IR. Now IR, which stands for instruction register, holds the currently fetched instruction, the one currently being decoded or executed. Before execution, instruction will be stored in IR. After execution starts, program counter is incremented to point to the next instruction. Next one is MAR, which is memory address register, which holds the address of data that need to be accessed. And the last one is MBR, Memory Buffer Register, a two-way register that holds data being transferred from CPU to main memory and vice versa.
So now coming to the process of fetching or instruction fetching. The instruction fetching is the process in which the instructions from memory are retrieved, making it available for the processor to work on it accordingly. In this process, program counter plays a very vital role. Program counter is a register which stores the address of the next instruction to be executed. So coming to the process, in this process the next instruction is fetched from the memory address that is currently stored in the program counter or PC and gets stored in the instruction register. The instructions are in the form of binary pattern from memory to control unit based on the value of program counter. The fetched instruction is always stored in instruction register. The address contained in program counter is copied to MAR, the memory address register. Program counter points to the next instruction to be read at the next cycle, that is increments. Coming to the next slide, we have the flowchart representation of how this instruction fetching process works. First, from the program counter, the address gets copied to the MAR, the memory address register, which specifies the address in the memory. Then it goes to the main memory, and from there the instruction is fetched by MBR, the memory buffer register. It acts as an interface between CPU and main memory. Then the fetch instruction gets stored in the IR or the instruction register.
Now we will discuss about second stage of basic instruction execution cycle, which is decode. So what exactly is decode in reference to the instruction execution? First of all, we already learned about fetch in previous slides. At this stage the instruction is fetched, so now in decode, by interpretation of this fetched instruction, the processor understands what it needs to do with the instruction and what data it needs to retrieve from that instruction or manipulate extraction of relevant information, and by doing so finally determining necessary control signals for execution. Now we will learn how the decode actually works. First of all, control unit interprets the meaning of instruction and accordingly generates control signals specifying the operation to be performed that directs the ALU, that is arithmetic logic unit, to perform it. Now the opcode and operand address stored in the instruction register is extracted and necessary control signals are determined for further stages. You can see the basic working of decode in the following flow diagram. The operand address stored in the instruction register is sent to the memory address register, and from there it goes to the main memory. So the data from the main memory sent to the memory buffer register, and finally it goes to the execution unit. Also the data stored in the operation is fed to the execution unit.
As we learned from previous slide, the fetch instruction is decoded to determine its operation and operand it requires. This stage identifies the specific operation the instruction represent. Now next step of the instruction execution cycle is execution of the instruction. This cycle performs computation or manipulation of the data, that is operation specified by the instruction using the operand specified in the instruction or in other registers. That means in this phase the CPU carries out the necessary calculations or operation to process the data and produce the desired result according to the instruction. Now there are some steps for the execution of instruction. The first one is operation and operand are transferred to the execution unit. That means the specific operation to be performed such as addition, subtraction or comparison and the data on which the operation will perform are sent to the execution unit. The second is ALU is directed to carry out the operation by signals generated by the control unit. The control signals are generated by the control unit are passes to the ALU which interprets them to carry out the desired operation. The ALU performs arithmetic calculations such as addition, subtraction, multiplication or division or logical operations such as AND or XOR on the operand provided. The next is the processor checks for interrupt, then either branches to the relevant interrupt service routine or starts the cycle again. That means the processor checks for interrupt signal. If interrupt is detected, the processor either immediately branches to an interrupt service routine, that is ISR, to handle the interrupt or completes the current instruction before responding to the interrupt. The last one, PC keeps track of the program execution process, ensuring that instructions are executed in correct sequence by incrementing after fetching and indicates termination of the program. This is how execute step is complete and output is produced.
Now comes the storage of the data in instruction execution cycle. So the store cycle is essential for the processor to save the result of the computation or manipulation for future use. Results of the executed instruction is stored back to memory or a register. So this steps updates the appropriate location with the computed value or outcome of the instruction. The store stage involves writing data to main memory or updating specific registers depending on the architecture of the computer system. In a processor with a register-based architecture, the result is stored in a register. In a memory-based architecture, it might be written back to a memory location.
This is the view of the map of all the above stages. Have a pause as it clears the picture.
So far we've learned how a complete instruction is being executed, but it was just for a single instruction. Whenever it comes to run a program, there are multiple instructions. So the processor has to perform repeatedly those instructions one after the other in a cycle. So in this instruction cycle, when one step completes and the next step is being carried out, the components that have been involved in the previous steps are sitting idle. Like here, fetching of instruction I1 is done and now it is being decoded. By this time, the components involved in the fetch step are currently free now. They have done their job and now waiting for the instruction cycle to complete so that they can be able to fetch the next instruction. Instead of doing so, the processor what it does is initializes the next instruction fetching while current is being decoded, meaning that as soon as I1 is fetched and is currently being decoded, along with that the fetching of instruction I2 simultaneously happens, and as we not want to keep the components idle. Similarly, when I1 is fetched, then I2 uses the decode mechanism and I3 fetches. By this we are making complete use of the hardware by effective and parallel processing of instructions. and likewise making a pipelines mechanism of stages, hence instruction pipeline, primarily with objectives of making complete use of the hardware, and consequently it utilizes time as there are time constraints as the processor has to perform those programs in a practical manner.